I should have done that in the beginning. But anyway, I haven't started the lecture itself. I talk about the essays, the readings, and attendance and participation points. Okay. All right. So indigenous peoples, today maybe around 300 million peoples, fourth or fifth percent, the fifth of the world population. But in terms of tribes, not native tribes, maybe thousands of them. So this is just very rough. Okay, we don't rely on this statistics so much. It just gives you a sense of the how large what we call indigenous peoples around the world. So the indigenous peoples, usually they have their own religious traditions. They are very specific to their tribes. They're very specific to their lives. Might not be shared, by other tribes around the world, but they might have some shared characteristics across cultures that we already discussed earlier. Okay. So we talk about this in, of course, in America, you have Native Americans and so on and so forth. People call Indians. They have indigenous religious traditions associated with them. In Southeast Asia, because we're going to focus on Southeast Asia, there's some names given by them or given by other peoples. So Iban, so we call Iban in Borneo. It's an island called Borneo, now part of Malaysia. Part of Borneo is also Indonesia, but Iban live in the island called Borneo. It's part of Malaysia. Aka in Laos, Karen in Thailand, Hmong in Vietnam, Mayan in the Philippines, and many others. Okay, these are just some of them. They have their own religious traditions associated with the names. In Malaysia, for example, in island Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, one of the terms that they use is orang asli. Orang asli is a local term, indigenous people, meaning indigenous people. Initially, it means the children of the earth. So the children of the earth, indigenous people, and the Malays, the people who count 61% of Malaysia, the Malays and the Orang Asli, or the Chinese people, are called Bumi Putra, the children of the earth. Bumi Putra meaning the local people, the native peoples. They claim that they belong to the region called Malaysia. Anyway, this is just the term, but basically indigenous people in Malaysia. In this indigenous people category, you have three major categories, subcategories of indigenous peoples in Malaysia. Semang or Negrito, usually, people associate with them darker skin, and then they live in the northern part of Borneo. And then Senoi, they have lighter skin, and this Senoi tribe would include Semai and Temia. Semai and Temia. One or two readings on Ireland, discuss Semai and Temia. Yeah. So this is the tribes that live in part of Malaysia. Then the third subcategory of these indigenous peoples considered to be Aboriginal Malay. So it's Malay, but Proto-Malay, or certain part of Malaysia. So these are subcategories within the indigenous peoples in today's Malaysia. Now, the term that is quite problematic among scholars, yet still used by scholars and peoples, animism. Animism, if you read the readings, there's some discussion about A.B. Tyler, for example, the British scholar who invented the term. It's a belief in spiritual being, a belief that there are spirits in everything. The belief that inanimate object an animate object have animate objects. Also, you have making things alive. So basically, what people consider dead things, dead objects, they consider them alive. They say they are living. Either the spirits are in or embedded in the objects, or spirits dwell in the objects. Yeah, so it could, the spirits could be part of the object or embedded in the object, or the object itself is spiritual, has a spiritual power, or a spirit dwells in that object. The objects could be a wood, could be trees, could be mountains, could be ocean, could be rivers, could be anything that they believe spirits dwell in or spirits are there. That's animism, a general word that some people use, even though other people criticize the term because animism sounds derogatory, negative. In other words, it seems like they just believe in spirit. They don't do anything else, for example. So that's the criticism against the use of animism. It seems like they only believe in spirit and they don't, and it seems like they are one monolithic thing, like everyone, every tribe to believe in the same way of the spirit and so on and so on. Animism like one term for so many, so diverse cultures and tradition across the world. So that's the criticism against the use of animism. Okay, so at least you understand why some people still use it and why some people don't want to use it. So for the animists, according to some scholars, if we had to use the term, religion and the world are not separated. So we live in the Western society where religion is just one domain of life, right? Like religion is when you go to mosque, you go to temple, you go to, and when you pray, or when you feel devoted to particular deities or gods or goddesses. It's just one domain of your entire life. Indigenous peoples, generally speaking, they don't separate the religious and the worldly, because everything is the same. Everything is one part of their life. Is there, this one is religion, this one is business, this one is science, this one, they don't really separate that. Yeah, they don't really separate, this is science, this is religion, this is business, this is family. To many people in the indigenous traditions, it's their life. So the whole thing is the life that they can, they engage and live. So religion and the world are not separated. All right, so I already talked about what animism is for some people, and it is about spirits. In the Philippines, an example of animism, according to some scholars, they have a supreme spirit. So when they believe there are many spirits, right? Ancestor spirits, nature spirits, dead people spirits, different kind of spirits, but they also, some of them have supreme spirit, like this, like spirit that is up and or over other spirits. So supreme spirit among all the other spirits. So they elevate particular spirit according to their cultures over other spirits. Some people worship the celestial bodies, things like angels, not the word angel that they use, or the sun or the moon or the stars, and then they would make idols to honor the ancestors. Sometimes they use woods because that's easier for them to symbolize, right? So using the objects that are familiar to them in order to connect and communicate with the deities, right? Wood, stones, and then they would draw the faces of man or animals, for example. So this is just one of the example of indigenous tradition in the Philippines. They would give offerings to the deities, to the spirits, in the forms of food. Remember when we talk about Southeast Asia, what is the main substance? Rice, right? So they would use rice to be the offerings for the gods. Drinks, water, coconut milk, coconut water. They also use clothes, all other things. So they could do anything with the offerings. Well, the main purpose of offerings, generally speaking, is to propitiate, to appease the gods, so they are not angry against them, or they want to make sure that their harvest is good, the soil is fertile. So basically to appease and to protect themselves from disease. Just an example today, under the coronavirus crisis, some of these indigenous population, indigenous peoples, they do certain things in order to be protected from the disease, and they worship the deities, the spirits, so that the spirits would protect them from being infected with the virus. Just an example. Of course, now the scale is so large that even the indigenous populations also have to respond. Not only Christians, Muslims, Jews, even everybody actually, they have to respond to the crisis. Indigenous populations also have their own ways how to respond to the crisis. Just to give you an illustration of what we are facing now, right? Rites of passage, birth, marriage, death, there are all kind of rituals associated with that. And of course, funeral, and many also do sacrifice. They sacrifice animals, certain animals, cow, in certain places, chickens, cows, goats, or any other things that they consider as sacred, but also they could sacrifice. And in the previous times, not so much now, human sacrifice. So they would sacrifice either the enemy of their tribes or certain segments of their society, their own tribe, that is considered less, inferior and things like that. They would also sacrifice them so that the tribe would be protected. But this is in the past. There's some myths and stories about this. I don't think today you would find human sacrifice unless during certain time where they have fights, they have wars between tribes. In early 20th century, there were cases where some tribes fight and then they kill each other, and then they consider the enemies as a sacrifice to the gods. It was, but that's not really a common place today. But just to make a point that humans also had been sacrificed earlier, not only animals. All right, Let's move to other indigenous population, the so-called the Semai people. The Semai people, they live in the forests in Malaya. So if you find Malaya, Malaya is the original name of Malaysia. So Malaysia is new name, but Malaya was the former name of Malaysia. Okay, Malaya, M-A-L-A-A. So it's now it's Malaysia. Also close to Mon Khmer. Mon Khmer is in Cambodia. You know, and Javanese. Okay, Javanese is in Indonesia. So Javanese is people in Java, the island of Java. They believe, the Semai people believe in the soul and spirit. So there are differences between soul and spirit. You have your reading. You can see the difference between the soul and the spirit. And healer. Healer is the person who is shaman. I hope you still remember shaman. S-H-A-M-A-N, right? The spirit medium. The people, the person who turn to be a spirit medium, who can communicate with the spirits and the humans. So they serve as the medium. Healer is one of the functions. In other words, this shaman, this spirit medium, usually they heal the sick using this, spells, mantra, and magical words, and so on and so forth, because they also have power from the spirits. So they also serve as the healer of the sick among the tribe, among the ethnic groups. Another people is the Iban. You call it Iban, I-B-A-N. So it's not Iban, okay? It's Iban. In Malaysia, again, I already mentioned about Iban in Malaysia. They have many spirits and God, or we call gods. They also use iron for the tools that they use, the household tools, and also for the ritual. And they hunter-gathering, they open the new land, they farm, they cultivate rice. And the Iban is famous for head hunting. So head hunting, this is one of the practices that is famous among the Iban people. It used to be. Again, it is in the past. The head hunting is considered a pride, a sense of pride, a sense of identity. It's a practice that Iban would do among themselves, but particularly with other tribes, with other ethnic groups. If, for example, another member, a member of another tribe, let's say kill, Iban member for some reason, then it is their pride to revenge against the enemy, and then they would hunt the enemy by cutting the head and then take the head to them. It seems like for us today, maybe violent and stuff like that, but it is a practice to make sure in the past, to make sure that people respect the law, respect the tribe, and honor the tribe. Well, we talk about head hunting as if like it's only in Asia or maybe other places, but in Europe and the United States, in our history also, we had this, of course, kind of hunting other peoples and so on. But headhunting is one of the practices so famous that Ivan is associated with. It's no more practice now, except in few places, few cases where they have some fights, ethno-religious violence. Then it happened to be that headhunting revived. It is to show one's courage, but it's also to make sure that they connect with the dead. All right. A part of the hunting of the head, also hunting the animals. As you can see here, they collect the you see the heads. This is from the past, and now this is the heads of the enemies, or maybe some of the members, and they have power. They have power. They are considered sacred even until today. And there is some ritual associated with this, okay? With the commemoration of the past of headhunting. So some of the Iban people still perform ritual associated with headhunting, even though they don't practice headhunting itself, but they preserve the tradition by performing a trance, dance, singing, ritual performance, even today. This is just an example. This is one of the offerings that some of this indigenous population do. What do you see there, right? You see rice, yeah. You see chicken, you see some vegetables and fruits, right? So they believe that the spirits would consume them at certain time, and of course they would do spell first, prayers and so on and so forth. But this offering is considered a very important part of making sure that the gods or the spirits or the deities are happy, not angry, and so on. All right. Another thing to remember about the indigenous tradition is magical, magical object. Like this is called kris, sharpened knife, traditional sharp knife that they would do when they fight, but now they don't necessarily use it for fighting. They would use it as talisman or amulet, having power to protect you. If you carry this, you would be protected from any danger, even though you don't use it for fighting or hurting somebody else or harming somebody people. But this object is sacred, and they would use it as having power to protect them from any evil spirits or any enemies in the form of humans. All right. The next slide actually talks about shaman, the term that I already repeatedly said. Shamanism is the practice of having shaman, the spirit medium. And one of the characteristics of shamanism is transvestite. Transvestite is we call a third gender. So if in ordinary life you are a man, then you would be you would become, when you become a spirit medium, non-male, neither male nor female. So you would turn someone else. You would turn into someone else, and that's a transvestite. So we consider priests, the spirit medium. So they would do singing, they would do spelling, they would trance, they would dance or perform or they use water, they use all kind of stuff. After they trance and then speak or communicate with the spirits, they go back to the ordinary life, then they turn into a man again, for example. So transvestite meanings, turn into a third gender, generally speaking. So you still have this shaman tradition everywhere, not only in Southeast Asia. You also find this shamanism in Africa, in other part of Asia, even in other places. All right. So by now we talks about spirits, spirit mediums, offerings, right? I hope now you understand about the indigenous traditions generally. But how about the views of the natural world, the nature? Different responses, different views, different attitude toward the nature. But generally speaking, they have two worlds, that the upper world and the underworld. The upper world, they would consider higher, upper. Maybe the ancestors dwell them. Their ancestor would be in this upper world. Good spirits also would be dwelling in the upper world. The underworld is usually evil spirits there, or bad ancestor, all what they believe are less, or even animals, dead animals, the ancestors of the animals, for example, and so on and so forth. Upper and under. And of course, they believe in the supernatural beings in the natural world. And then they need to communicate through the offerings, through the trance, through the prayers, and so on. All right, before I show you the Iban life at Sarawak, Borneo, let me see if I have a question from here. All right. Just want to check if there is any question, okay, before I continue. All right. Okay. All right. Can this be seen as heaven versus hell? What is the question? Well, it's not really about heaven and hell, okay? Thank you for bringing this up, question about heaven and hell, like paradise and hell. Indigenous populations that we know in Southeast Asia, they don't really have this notion of heaven and hell. It's quite different, because heaven and hell comes in the Semitic cultures. Semitic cultures, Semite, I don't know if I already mentioned the term. Semite is one of the civilizations in what we consider as the Middle East and Mediterranean. You see Abrahamic Christians, Muslims, many of them believe in heaven and hell. Also Zoroastrian in Persia, in today's Iran, they actually earlier than this, they have the concept of heaven and hell. Indigenous population in Southeast Asia, they don't really talk about heaven and hell. So it's not, quite elaborate as these world religions that we know about heaven and hell. Okay, what happens if the tribute is not accepted by the spirit? Oh, that's a good question. They, for example, right? I just give you an example. So they would be offering, for example, it is a drought, right? They don't have rains for months. They want to ask the deities to give them the rains, right? They grant them the rains, and then the rains don't come. They still do offerings. So there are two possibilities. One, their offerings are not accepted. So they have to make sure that they would fix the offering. So maybe the ritual is wrongly performed, or or there's some participants, or not participating well, and so on. So there's some. Usually they have some some gatherings among the elderly, and why it's not raining yet, just an example. So they reconsider, and then they might do also another offering to fix that. Secondly, another possibility is it's not about being accepted, it's about the continuity of communicating with them, regardless of whether or not the rain comes, whether or not certain diseases are healed, and so on and so forth. So they continue to preserve the tradition regardless of the effects, regardless of the impacts, regardless of the outcome of the offerings. In other words, scientists or people who live in a scientific mindset, they would research, they would do, if they don't find a vaccine, for example, they will continue researching about the vaccine, what vaccine to cure the sickness, right? But they don't necessarily do that. They simply continue the tradition, the rituals, and they just believe that the gods or the deities, the spirits, always are with them, regardless of the effects, regardless of the outcome. So it's not about the cause and effects, like practical effects that they would expect. It's more about how they can feel powerful and powered by relying their lives, part of their lives, on the existence of the ancestor spirits and also the natural spirits. So you don't really know whether it was accepted or not. It's more about the responses and the sense of devotion and identity and preservation of cultures and tradition that they want to keep through the generations. One of the reasons why some of the indigenous practices are gone, one of the reasons, because some of the young generations, they go to school, Christianity, Islam, or Hinduism or Buddhism comes, or missionaries or scientists or doctors come to them, right? And then these doctors come to them and introduce medicines, and using drugs to heal their sick. So they have to negotiate, what happens to the offerings, and then now you have a doctor helping you, to heal your sickness, for example. So there's some negotiation, some convert to the new religion because they felt that the traditional offering were not working. They didn't work. So they converted to a Christianity, converted to the scientific mindset, converted to Islam, converted to other world religions coming to them. But some of them preserve their traditions. So even though you have a doctor, but they still keep the tradition. They believe that more power, the better. The more power you get, the better. So you get the powers from the spirits, you got the powers from the medicines. So they combine, and they don't see these powers not necessarily in contradiction. Okay. So in today's world, if you do research about indigenous populations, they negotiate. It's not like they are against both. They would combine them as long as they still feel that they are in protection. All right, let's see thank you for the question. That's a really good question on the chat. Okay, let me show you the YouTube. Sorry, this is not color or HD, okay? This is black and white video, but it's really good one.
heads, human heads, hang on the veranda of a dark longhouse far up the River Eye in the interior of Sarawak, Cambodia. Chieftain Jimboon, like all other darks, is no longer a headhunter, though during his youth he did take heads. He's carrying one now. Heads like this, taken in the past, still have meaning for the modern darks. They're an echo of their history and part of their beliefs today. The bundle in front of his belt contains his magic charms, a boar's tusk, sacred stones, and other objects of pagan magic. He straps on his sword. His hands are tattooed. Only a man who had taken heads was in the old days allowed that privilege. He's making an individual, a personal offering to one of the heads he took himself. It's an offering to the past beliefs of the darks, beliefs that are changing. He pours out drinks to the spirits and drinks himself. He makes offerings of food, plates of rice, eggs, and vegetables are set out. This is a ceremony to propitiate the spirits. The spirits are generally thought of as living in the sky. They're symbols of birds, the hawk, the hornbill, woodpecker. He puts the offering out in the open. He covers it with a cloth so that it can't be seen from below, but can be seen by the birds of omen in the sky above. A longhouse is really a village, maybe a whole day's journey from one longhouse to the next. As many as 30 or 40 families may live under a single roof. The whole building is raised off the ground on stilts as a protection against snakes, scorpions and floods, and also to prevent the domestic pigs from getting in. At each end is a single log ladder, and inside take place all the activities of ordinary village life. This woman is carrying her child down to the river. Children amongst the darks are carried for 2 or 3 years and suckled for even longer than that. The longhouse is always built beside a river. The rivers are the chief means of getting about in this huge wild country, and they're also used for collecting water, bathing, doing the laundry, any other domestic things. As far up the river as this, there aren't any crocodiles. And lower down there are. And so the people, while they're bathing, they're perfectly safe. Felling the jungle is the first stage in producing the annual crop of rice. Nothing is more important in diet life than rice. Each stage, felling the jungle, sowing the seed and reaping the harvest, is celebrated with a religious festival. This work of clearing is done commonly. All the men of the longhouse join in. The farms eventually will be tended and cared for by individual families. Each year, new areas of jungle are cleared, and at the end of each season, the old farms are left to revert to the jungle, and they may be left to lie fallow for 10 or 20 years. After cutting comes the burning of the felled trees. In a country as wet as Borneo, it's difficult to get the timber and scrub dry enough to set it alight. It obviously depends on the spell of dry weather, which is largely a matter of luck. Or, as the darks prefer to think of it, of having the spirits on their side. The whole success of a crop depends on having a good burn. This family clearing of about 10 acres has had a fairly good burn. so that at once the planting can begin. Again, it's a communal effort, and the whole longhouse joins in. The men walk in front, driving their long poles into the ground. It's called dibbling. They're making holes for the rice grains. The difficult jobs from all the half-burnt litter of branches and scrub that's been left lying about. The women follow, flicking in rice grains, flipping them very skillfully into the holes. It needs a trained hand, and it's surprising how very rarely they miss. How the rice fields are from the village, and it may be 10 miles, in the evening they all make their way home down the river. For miles the rivers may be calm and placid, then suddenly break into fierce rapids. The Darks are very excitable people. Here's a man dancing in the boat out of sheer exuberance. Often they leap overboard into really dangerous water for no apparent reason. Every year, boats upset or crash into the rocks and people get drowned. There are whirlpools and strong undertows, and the river here is probably 10 or 20 feet deep. It doesn't seem to worry them, as they go yelling and shouting at the light. Back in the longhouse, the old women spend much of their time setting out the rice to dry on the wide veranda that's specially constructed for the purpose. They must spread it quite thinly to let the sun get at it. Otherwise, the rice would soon be spoilt in a very damp climate like Borneo. The chickens can get at it too, and another job for the old women is to scare the chickens off. The dried grain is then pounded by the young women. The object is to get the husk off, otherwise it simply couldn't be eaten. Some prefer to grind it. Then the rice is taken out of the mortar by hand. Rice is eaten 3 or even 4 times a day. Alone it would be dull, and many of the jungle vegetables are collected to go with it. One of the most popular of these are bamboo shoots, which grow wild all over Borneo. The fresh shoot of a young tree like this makes a delicious vegetable, either raw or cooked. The outside skin has to be trimmed off. The heart tastes rather like asparagus. The river has fish, the jungle its game. Cooking is easy, even in the open. You chop off a section of bamboo, and then you chop up some of the food on leaves and sprinkle salt all over it. You stuff the food into the bamboo and simply put it on the fire. The green bamboo doesn't burn, but the food gets nicely cooked. Darks are one of the few people in Southeast Asia who can make all their own clothing, and they specialize in ceremonial blankets. They start off by collecting various leaves, either pineapple leaves or certain kind of palm, such as you'll see here, and this little girl is putting the leaf out in the river to get it clean. Meanwhile, her elder sister is preparing the dye. And her mother is stripping down some leaf that's already been cleaned with a fine wooden comb. The dye comes from the bark of a tree. The soft part of the leaf is being combed out, leaving just the strong threads behind. The dye must be mixed carefully. Most of the women can weave, although it's a highly skilled job. And here's one beginning to get a pattern going before she puts it onto the big loom. Now the strands are being prepared, dyed red, and they'll be dried out in the sun. These strands will be used for tying patterns into the woven material by a method that's known as ikat. In ikat, you dip the whole cloth in sequences, part of it blocked off each time into different colors to get the pattern. It's a very difficult, complicated business. The weaver puts over her back a kind of halter, which enables her to pull the whole loom tight while she goes on working with her hands, throwing the shuttle from left to right. This is the result. This is a ceremonial blanket. It's very thick, almost as thick as tweed, and extremely strong. This is a traditional, old design that has human headhunting associations. Nowadays, as you can see, new designs are creeping in. Someone seems to have seen a picture of the trooping of the color. Aeroplanes too are becoming symbols to replace the hawk and the hornbill as all-seeing eyes. The favorite art sport is cockfighting. Here the boys are only letting them spar. In a real fight, the cocks have huge, long, vicious spurs put on them, and they fight to the death. Being masculine and beautiful is very important amongst the Dayaks, especially the men. They're extremely vain, and I suppose they have more time to spare in beautifying themselves than the women. They do their hair in very elaborate, complicated styles. Sometimes they take hours to complete. The whole body is decorated with all kinds of tattooed patterns. It may take a man as much as 10 or 15 years to get the whole set complete. The patterns are put on with a stencil cut out of dried leaf. Ink is made from soot and pounded leaf, is then smeared over the stencil. It's pushed down onto the arm so that the pattern comes out on the flesh. This is quite difficult when the arm is round and the stencil is flat. The parts of the pattern that fail to come out clearly are touched up with a small brush. The stuff he's putting on is mainly soot, which has to be banged and tapped through the skin exactly along the line of the design. Now the tattooer is tapping over the whole pattern with a thorn needle dipped into ink. He's tapping just strongly enough to break the skin and allow the ink to penetrate.
Okay, so I'm gonna continue. You can watch this, the whole video but this is the ceremony part that
Drinking is always part of these kind of ceremonies. First of all, they pour spirits to the other kind of spirits, and then every guest is given a drink. All dark ceremonies are liable eventually to develop into very heavy drinking parties. There are moments of gaiety and moments of seriousness. This is serious again, as one of the elders circles all the guests present with a sacrificial cockerel. Again, it's to propitiate the spirits. Eggs, rice, a little drink are put out as offerings, and the old man gives thanks for the good harvest and prays for the same again next year. Dancing plays an important part in every festival of this kind. And the idea behind it is still headhunting. And this man is going through the formal motions of fighting with a sword.
All right. So I think by now you can have a better sense of how indigenous ritual and indigenous life operates. In Thailand, we have also the same forms of indigenous religious culture, spirit medium, magic, songs, dance. So you have in one of your readings a discussion of this spirit medium, also performance tradition in Thailand. This is one of the invocation prayers that they would do. May all bad influences stay far from us. May all the bad gods be driven away. May all the benevolent spirit grant us health and strength. May all of you protect us and give us blessings. So that's a kind of prayer or invocation that they would do in their languages. Mother Goddess, for example, in Vietnam is very important. The prayer goes like, "Oh, my mother, I pray to you, my Lord," and so on and so forth. So if you are asked about what is this spirit medium, well, the purpose in general that they find well-being, harmony, and good fortune in life. In Indonesia, the term that Indonesian use comes from a Sanskrit term, an Indian language term, Sanskrit, agama. Agama, A-G-A-M-A, so that's how you pronounce it, agama. In English becomes a religion. So agama is a local term that many in Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore and Brunei use to say religion. Agama itself, it's a term from a Sanskrit term from India, but it becomes localized. So when you have the readings about some people who don't have yet agama, who don't have yet religion, they usually refer to these indigenous populations. So Muslims Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Confucians, because they consider themselves world religion communities, world religions. When they talk about indigenous religions, they don't consider the indigenous religion as equal to them, so that they consider these indigenous, tribal, local, native, indigenous traditions not yet agama, not yet religion. They don't have yet a religion, because what they mean by religion is Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and so on, while the indigenous is not considered a religion. They consider culture, tradition, belief, spirituality, and so on and so forth. Other terms that they don't use the term religion. So this is to suggest that the mainstream peoples, the people who become or converted to world religions, usually consider the peoples that they, the indigenous, the natives, consider them as less religious or not have religion. You can find this discussion in one of the chapters of the readings. Okay, we will talk more about that later on. We'll talk about Indonesia. So names of indigenous traditions or religions in Indonesia. I have here a list of names: Kaharingan, Perbegu, Aluk Todola, Kejawen, Sunda Wiwitan, Wetutulu. All these names are the names of the indigenous religions. Okay, don't worry about memorizing this, but at least when you read these terms or names, they refer to indigenous religions in Indonesia. You have here 6 indigenous religions, but you also have other indigenous religions that I don't have here. You also have, of course, other indigenous religions in other places. Remember, however, okay, I will consider the questions later on. Okay, I know some of the questions here, very good questions. I have here many religions actually also have belief in spirits, right? It's not only the indigenous population, who have these beliefs and ceremonies and rituals toward spirits. In Christianity, there's spirits, the different, Holy Spirit is one of the key, for example. In Islam, you also have spirits, roh, or some also consider angels as part of the spiritual beings, angels. And in Japan, you have Shinto, is the way of the spirits also. So world religions do have beliefs and tradition of spirits. Maybe the difference is, according to the world religion perspective, they are more sophisticated. Maybe they are written down in texts, right? Like scriptures. Indigenous population, they don't have scriptures in general. They worship, and then they do the tradition of spirits and spirit mediums orally, generation by generations, without schools, without religious schools, without texts, without priests like authority, like imam or priests or monks, right? So you have more institutions in world religions and texts. Indigenous religions don't usually have texts or institutions. This is some of the differences between world religions with regard to spirits and indigenous religions with regard to spirits, okay? Now we have 5 minutes left. So to conclude about indigenous religion, and I will have a poll or question or quizzes after this. I will give you questions, all right? Just be prepared. So to summarize, we talk about indigenous religions, spirits, or animism. Again, this is problematic term, but if you have to use it, try to define it. It's about nature and ancestors and nature's spirits. And then nature and humans usually are considered equal. So humans and nature are considered equal. And you have spirit medium and some sacrifice, like animal sacrifice, human head sacrifices, or offerings that they would give. Then you have the notion of indigenous and world religions. After we talk about indigenous, we will talk about world religions. Okay. I will consider that. I will discuss the questions on the chat. But before that, let's try to do the poll. Okay. All right. I hope that you can see the poll. Okay. How would you define religion? Okay. Just pick one of them. Let me see. All right. Go ahead. How would you define religion? Belief in supernatural, reference, service, worship, moral virtue, individual feelings.
Where's the
Oh, can you see the poll?
No.
No?
No.
I already, okay, let's see. You can see? All right, let's see again. No poll yet. All right, it's already here, but I don't know why. Let me end poll first. All right, what should I do? Okay, it's already here. Poll. Let's see.
Is it an app, Professor? Is it the poll everywhere?
It's a polling in, on the Zoom, you have polling, right? And then I already created the question, and then anybody knows, can only see a slide. Oh, I see. I should double check again this one, but here is relaunching. Let me see. So not there?
Oh, I see it. It came
It's
up.
there. It's there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I know it's already over time a little bit. I hope you're still with me. Maybe another 5-10 minutes. But if, yeah.
Is there a right or wrong answer, or is just
No. There is no right and wrong answer
okay? It's
for
just
this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you have 28 seconds left. Well, that's a lot. All right, that's all right. It's already made. I mean, it's already default, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Just what you think is best, definition according to you. So it's not right and wrong answer, because there are a lot of definitions, but these are some of them. Just want to see which answers, we'll see. All right. Okay. 80% voted. Maybe I have to end now, right? Just.
I saw the poll but it erased. I can't see it anymore.
You don't see?
Yeah, I saw it when it popped up, but then it went away.
That's all right. It's okay for now. We'll try another question. Okay, so I'll just end for now, and then share result. Okay, for now. Okay.
The results are up. The results are up.
Okay, so as you see here, so your friends already answers. 61% answer individual feelings and experiences in relation to the divine. So that's, and then reference, worship, service, another one, and that's okay. And then belief in supernatural beings, reality of the sacred, symbols, and all right. So at least you have a sense of a variation of your friends. Let's let's do the second one. All right, the second question. How do you characterize Southeast Asia? Okay, there's no wrong answer. Diverse races, ethnicity, languages, rice, tropical, natural beauty and biodiversity, nationalities like Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia. This is just you know, to see how you describe Southeast Asia. All right. Okay. Yeah, I can just end Paul for now. That's fine. It doesn't have to be all of you for now. That's all right. I just want to see. Okay. So this is the result. So most of you described Southeast Asia in terms of the diversity, right? You know, race, ethnicity, language, cultures, and some of you natural beauty and biodiversity, the nature, like you know, 2/3 of Indonesia is an ocean, for example. It's an archipelago. And you have mainland Southeast Asia, you know, all this beautiful nature. Then many of you also talks about nationalities. Southeast Asia is about Vietnam, Philippines, or Indonesia, Malaysia, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and so on. All right. Okay. How about one more poll, and then we'll end. Okay, just one more. I hope you're okay. All right. There's a correct answer to this. All right. What is the predominant religions in Thailand, Burma, and Laos? We haven't talked about this. I already mentioned it. Yeah. Just to give you like one. All right, we'll see. Okay. All right. So yeah. Yeah, the answer is Buddhism. So for example, in Thailand, you have 95% mostly Theravada Buddhists. Burma also mostly Buddhist. Laos also mostly Buddhist, predominantly Buddhist. So it's considered Buddhist majority countries in Southeast Asia. Okay. Of course, indigenous religions are there. Christianity also is strong in these places. Confucians also are quite, you know, it's minority, but still is there. Islam also in Thailand, in Burma, very small in Laos. Hinduism also some, but mostly Buddhist. Okay. All right. So we had 3 polls for today. Thank you so much. And let me check. Yeah, just write something on the chat. So I, you know, just to mark, so I can get marked that you attended here. So here, that's fine. Just write your, yeah. So I will save this as a proof of your attendance and participation. All right. I know there's few questions here that I haven't addressed, but I will address some of the questions here on Thursday. All right. I hope you have a good night. Again, stay safe and healthy. I'll do my best too. It's hard to stay at home all the time, but I miss campus, I miss you, I miss students, colleagues and, people, real people. But this is the list that we can do, and I hope you still can learn, and we can learn and teach in this way. All right. Good night. And
Good night.
thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Professor.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, how to, what is that, the recording thing, right? Stop recording.